Hi there, welcome back to another small ramble video with me, writer and mental health advocate Tobe Allen. I'm also one half of the BARROW Podcast, the show I do with my mum where we talk about divorce, dysfunctional families and mental illness while writing a memoir together. Lately, I have been attempting to remind myself that I can do the things that I actually do. This week's episode of the show, you can find a link right here. We were looking at a collection of personal essays by a writer by the name of Meghan Daum. And I guess those personal essays really put in mind, how to put this? It just sort of brought back into focus like what my relationship with my own writing practice actually is, you know? I've been struggling with doing the memoir with mum. I think in part because it's a joint project, which makes it sort of tricky on that level. I've never done something like that before. But, I've had a lot of doubt about my ability and a lot of fear about not just completing the book and what will happen if and when it gets done, but like actually, can I finish it, and can I finish it to the standard that I would like? And these anxieties about my ability and my creative practice generally are completely getting in the way of and actually mucking up the practice, the doing, the process. Why? Why is that the case? Because this book is so personal. I mean, I'm sure I've said it before and I'll say it again. I mean, it just takes a lot out of you. The level of emotional investment to write a book of this nature, it's uncomfortable, but it also, at least the effect it's had on me is to sort of ask questions about like, well, what's the outcome of doing this, right? Like, if this book in particular doesn't get published, given that it has been and is being and continues and will continue to be such a emotionally difficult experience, if it isn't successful in some kind of way, if it doesn't result in publication at least, then what's it all been for? And I think that the emotional investment in the project is actually, at least in my mind, it's heightening and elevating the stakes of the project itself. Whereas if you're writing a book, it's kind of like writing your first book in a way. Like, you kind of putting your reputation on the line. You're sort of asking the world to validate you and say, like, can I do this actually? So there's quite a lot at stake naturally with your first book. But there probably isn't so much at stake thereafter. I mean, your reputation, sure, but if you're just writing like a novel, if you're just writing fiction, for instance, not that it's easy, and not that you're not emotionally invested, because of course, the best writers always give a little bit of themselves in everything they're doing, but you can actually be a little calmer perhaps about the process and feel like, well, if nothing comes of this, at least I had fun, right? I think with what we're doing, I'm enjoying doing the podcast. I'm probably not enjoying writing the book, to be honest. And I do worry about whether that comes through, when it turns into this kind of cerebral, almost academic kind of exercise, which there have been periods of that. And then I get worried. I'm like, oh, what if that comes through in the writing and the writing becomes really stilted and sort of stiff? And so I have a lot of fears, I have a lot of anxieties, and I have a lot of like perceived pressures around this project. But what I've been trying to do lately is just reinforce some sort of belief in my creative practice. Like, just try to just take it all down a notch, really, and try to take the emotion out of it as much as possible, knowing that it's a more emotionally loaded project than an average, than other things, let's say. I haven't got it down perfectly, far from it, but one of the things I've been trying to just really hone in on and focus on is process itself. I saw a post on Instagram actually where somebody was talking about they got absolutely in their own head and they started to think they'd already written a book and they'd been successful, they'd had it published. But then they started thinking, well, the next book's got to be sort of bigger and better. And they had a lot of imposter syndrome where they sort of almost thought that getting published the first time was just luck. And then they started changing their own creative practice. They used to write by hand and then they stopped doing that because that's not what real writers do. And they ended up just in a mess. They couldn't write. And they had to actually step right away from their practice and say, I have got to like deal with myself and I've got to get back to who I am and self-belief and all that sort of stuff. I have been through similar things, not exactly that, but, you know, changing my practice around, you know, all of a sudden. And something that has a formula that's worked in the past, you know, leaving it behind because, well, things need to happen faster. I need to progress faster. And with this project in particular, thinking like, well, it's so different because it's a co-authored thing. I'm just going to like throw the rule book out. I'm going to throw away everything I already know because apparently now I don't know anything at all. Because this is so different. It's so, you know, and that has just screwed me up, you know, like all that kind of second guessing and all that doubt and all the anxiety that I've just talked about, all that internalized sort of perception around there's so much at stake and blah, blah, blah. That I've never experienced so many niggles, so many little things coming to sort of bite me while just trying to put a book together as with this memoir. It's been really hard to sort of just like find a path and get through it. But it's not about creative practice. It's not about writing. It's not about this project. It's not about the emotional stakes of the project or any of that nonsense. What it's about is me. It's about self-belief and it's about dealing with myself. So much like that author that I'd seen who had posted their story to Instagram, I have been just trying to chill out and just trying to keep myself sane and keep my head above water, so to speak, in terms of, you know, being nice to myself, giving myself a pat on the back, reminding myself of my values and my value as a human being, as well as a writer, and reminding myself of my ability. Hey, you've written before, you know, like, you can do this. You can absolutely do this. It's okay. There are no stakes. It's all right. And the other thing, I guess the one practical step that I've been employing that is worth mentioning is that I've actually been doing less work, or rather I've been limiting my hours that I will allow myself to think about this project. I got into a bit of a tangle where I was working in the studio for maybe an hour, but then I'd take all my notes with me to the couch, to the living room, or I'd bring stuff to bed with me and read through it. And this project just started bleeding out into every other aspect of my life, which is pretty natural given what it's about. But because Mum and I are talking, we're recording those for the podcast, we're living together, we're also working on this. It's been very, very hard, and it continues to be hard to establish boundaries and really put those boundaries in place with this work. But I'm aware of it and I'm doing a better job of that. And that is restoring my sense of peace of mind, calm, which is in turn, you know, reinforcing as best as possible my confidence, my belief in myself, and therefore the process by extension. So that might be a bit of a muddled, well, it's another ramble, isn't it? But that's what's been going on lately. And, you know, creative practice is tough, and sometimes we have success and then we either try to recreate the formula again too much so, or we suddenly change gears thinking that it's new, and we've got to do something completely different. Sometimes we're not having success and we believe that's entirely our fault, so we start doing all sorts of weird things when in fact it's got nothing to do with us at all. It's just we're not able to place the manuscript with a publisher. We haven't found the right, agent or peer or whoever who understands it and likes it. You can have written a good book and it may never be published. I know people for whom that's the case. So it's a really tricky thing, and it's very hard not to either despair or fall into this kind of pit of self-doubt. Self-doubt it's really haunting. It can really mess you up. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. I'm going to leave that one there. But if you've got like a story similar to this, or you want to add to what I've said, then feel free to leave a comment. I'm always interested in people that have, kind of got in their own head a bit. I think there's a golfing term, yips. You get the yips, like you can't take your swing. You just nerves get the better of you. You get in your own head. Yeah, if you've got a story like that, let me know. And how did you get out of it if you did? What was your way out? And what's your creative practice like at the moment? What's it like today? I'd be interested to hear from you. As always, I think you'll like the Barrow podcast. If you have listened to this, links and further information can be found in the description to today's video, as well as on the homepage to this YouTube channel. Until next time, bye.